Today I want to talk about the science of non-attachment. And, as you often hear me say, modern science keeps reaffirming what the Buddha taught 2,600 years ago and really confirms how amazingly insightful he was. And this concept of non-attachment, as you know, is deeply rooted in Buddhist teachings. Um, but current science, some recent research that I ran across beautifully aligns with this wisdom of the Dharma. Buddhism has long recognized or long taught that something arises from clinging and attachment to desires, to symbols, to relationships, to fleeting experiences. And this whole recent body of research and what they're calling experiential attachments and its behavioral consequences really mirrors the Buddha's wisdom on craving, the second noble truth, as you know, which underpins this cycle of suffering that we get into. And from a Buddhist perspective, non-attachment is just not some abstract, esoteric, spiritual idea. It's a very practical, pragmatic way of living that fosters inner peace, clarity, liberation, and so forth. So it really fits nicely with this hands-on, practical approach to secular Buddhism that we talk about. And when the Buddha talked about it, he's talking about both the mental and emotional grasping at things, at people, at experiences, at imagined or real sources of happiness. And it's driven by this mistaken belief that we all carry that external conditions, whether that's more material possessions, whether that's social status, whether that's sensory pleasures, can provide lasting fulfillment. There was included in this review of the research, there was an interesting study where they looked at teenagers' mood fluctuations up and down based on the presence or absence of these little hearts that they would get on their social media. And, these sort of symbolic rewards that have no intrinsic value, have no meaning other than just sort of some kind of minor little indicator that someone has approved of you. But they saw that these hearts, the presence of these hearts, the more there were, yielded a disproportionate power over the emotional state. So the more emotional hearts, the clicks that the kid got, the better he felt about himself, and the fewer he got, the more deflated. And it's just a classic example of how even symbolically that this form of craving, this sort of habitual desire for validation and pleasure, leads to dissatisfaction or happiness and satisfaction when the desired object is either present or when it's absent or when it loses its appeal. And the Buddha described this cycle of this craving and dissatisfaction that we get into, samsara, this endless loop of striving and grasping and suffering. And that includes, it doesn't matter whether we're trying to get social media likes or clicks or purchasing items to feel important, seeking promotions at work at the expense of our well-being, working ourselves to death. All of these behaviors, this whole basket of behaviors, are forms of clinging and grasping. And they exemplify how attachment to even symbolic rewards really narrows our attention. It really sort of takes over, hijacks our attention. It binds us to this more reactive, unskillful way of living that's pretty much guaranteed to cause us suffering. As you've heard me say, the Buddha taught that seeking such attachments is like drinking salt water to quench our thirst. We think it's going to do it, but of course we just get thirstier. That these things may provide temporary relief, but ultimately they deepen our suffering. So non-attachment in the Buddhist world is not about rejecting life. It's not about avoiding pleasure. It's not about not engaging in the world. But it is about doing all that free as we can possibly be from clinging. We can have pleasant experiences, but it's the clinging to them that gets us. And this more recent research on non-attachment is defined as, quote, noticing the pull of socially and culturally created rewards without automatically acting on them. That's the definition they gave for non-attachment. Noticing the pull of socially and culturally created rewards, whatever they may be, without automatically acting on them. And quote, reorienting attention to present circumstances and values-based action. I mean, the Buddha himself could have written that description out of this more recent research. And this, as I said, resonates deeply with Buddhist practice, which asks us to cultivate awareness of thoughts, emotions, and impulses without being made prisoner of them. You know, our mindfulness practice, which is central to the path, trains us to observe our cravings and aversions as they arise and just watching them, not getting pulled into them. When we bring mindful attention to the pull of these symbolic rewards, such as praise, such as status, such as material gain, when we bring our mindful attention to that, we create space between the stimulus and the response. Oh, there it is. I can just watch it arise. I can watch it pass away. And what happens with that is that we cultivate wisdom rather than these habits of mind. You know, we align our actions with our deeper values rather than the societal or cultural conditions of constantly grabbing, constantly clinging. You know, for example, that same teenager who notices the urge to check Instagram for likes might pause, might reflect, might redirect their attention to activities that nurture genuine connection, not this sort of false symbolic likes on their Instagram page. Non-attachment, as the Buddha taught it, involves recognizing the impermanent and insubstantial nature of the things we cling to. That's such a fundamental teaching here, the impermanent and insubstantial nature of the things we cling to. You know, in the Instagram example, these little hearts, and they're just pixels on a screen. They have no inherent meaning. They have no value. They have no worth. They're just a way that this person seeks them to sort of reaffirm themselves. Somebody out there must like me, or they wouldn't click on the link. Similarly, promotions, possessions, political righteousness, these are all fleeting phenomena that don't ever provide enduring satisfaction. They arise and pass away like all impermanent phenomena. And when we see their impermanence, when we recognize it, when we enter into these experiences with knowledge of their impermanence, we loosen their grip on us. We free ourselves from much of the suffering that they cause. Now, as we often talk about, there's a common misconception about non-attachment, is that it somehow involves passivity, disengagement, or apathy. Not the case. Buddhism advocates a middle way, a balanced approach that engages with life, but neither clings to it nor rejects it. We observe it. We become observers of our experience. We participate fully in the world, but we maintain an inner sense of freedom. And this is what this research is when they talk about values-based action. It really aligns with the Buddhist principle of right intention. You know, we're doing it in a way that aligns with our values, that indicates, you know, this is non-harming. You know, it's acting from a place of non-attachment means prioritizing actions that promote well-being, that reduce harm, that promote compassion, that promote authenticity over those actions that are driven by ego, by fear, by aversion, by the pursuit of symbolic rewards. We just get off that treadmill. We just get out of that hamster cage. So think about it, for example, a person working long hours, just working to achieve a promotion. If the motivation is rooted in attachment to status or financial gain, they may pay the price of sacrificing their health, their relationships, leading to greater suffering. But if the work is guided by values such as generosity, service, personal growth, making the world a better place, then we engage with these tasks wholeheartedly. But we don't get so consumed by the outcome that if it doesn't turn out the way we want, we suffer greatly. It comes down to our motivation, to the intentions which we set, which is why mindful awareness and self-knowledge is so important. Why am I doing this? What is the driving force here? Now, that's not to say that our motives are ever pure. There's always going to be some self-interest in there and some ego gratification in there, but it's not the dominant motivator. Okay. Now, non-attachment, as I said a minute ago, doesn't mean we abandon our goals. We pursue them, though, with discernment, with equanimity. We accept both success and failure with equal grace. As this recent research establishes, non-attachment, and this was the outcome measures in the study. Not surprisingly, non-attachment was linked to well-being, to greater pain tolerance on one measure, to greater openness, to more pro-social stance. They were able to establish a number of positive outcomes when people were redirected into practicing non-attachment. And these findings couldn't be more clear in echoing the benefits described by the Buddha millennia ago. When we let go of attachment, we free ourselves from all that mental agitation, all that emotional turbulence that arises from craving and aversion. It's just a treadmill we never get off. And this inner peace, this equanimity, means we face life's challenges with greater resilience, with greater clarity. We don't get knocked off balance quite so easily. It fosters compassion. It fosters connection. Because when we're no longer fixated on symbolic rewards like the hearts on the Instagram page, it takes us out of the ego to a large extent. We become more tuned into others. There is the study gives another example of forwarding a political post to affirm a group identity. In other words, I'm forwarding you this thing that I agree with politically. The outcome there was they saw how that attachment to that post that I sent you hardens divisions, fuels hostility, fuels separateness. On the other hand, non-attachment enables us to engage with others from a place of understanding, from a place of kindness, rather than the more ego-driven self-righteousness or tribalism or us versus them. And then finally, non-attachment enhances our capacity for joy and gratitude. When we let go of this endless pursuit of more, 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 we appreciate more the present moment. We tune into the beauty and the awe of the present moment. We find contentment in simple pleasures, which aligns with the Buddhist practice of sympathetic joy, rejoicing in the happiness of others without envy, without comparison. This non-attachment is not our default. It's not an innate quality, but it is a skill that we can learn and cultivate with our practice. Mindfulness in our meditation practice is a powerful tool for developing this awareness and developing the insight to help us let go of clinging. By observing our thoughts and emotions without judgment, we see them as passing phenomena, as impermanent phenomena, rather than fixed truths, which diminishes their power over us, helps us act with greater freedom and intention, which is exactly what the Buddha offers us. Another practical approach to reflecting on impermanence is reminding ourselves that all things are transient. It helps us loosen our grip on those things and focus more on what matters. And gratitude practice is a great doorway to this, okay? It helps us counteract this tight clinging. It shifts our attention from what we think we lack, from a scarcity mindset, to what we already have. And then finally, living in alignment with our ethical principles supports non-attachment. It reduces the mental turmoil caused by unskillful action. The problem with unskillful actions when they violate our values and our ethics is we then have to spend all this mental activity, all these mental gymnastics trying to justify or excuse it or make some sense of it. It's exhausting. But when we act with kindness, with integrity, with generosity, those are the conditions for inner peace and liberation. And what amazed me about this recent study was this modern, again, validation of the Buddhist teachings. From a teenager chasing Instagram likes to this overworked professional striving for status, these patterns of what they called experiential attachment reflect this universal human condition of craving and its consequences, craving and the suffering that results. The Buddha instead offered a timeless and practical framework for understanding and overcoming the suffering. Because when we cultivate mindfulness, when we embrace impermanence, when we live in alignment with our values, we embody moment to moment non attachment in daily life. And this again is not a denial of joy, it's not a denial of pleasure. It is it is engaging with it without clinging tightly to it, opening the door to true freedom, engaging with the world wholeheartedly while remaining unbound or untethered by it. In the words of the Buddha, this is from the Dhammapada, he says, let go and you will see the truth. Let go and you will see the truth. So those are some thoughts this morning on the science, the recent science of non-attachment, which, as I said, really affirms the Buddhist teachings.